Maria Santos had always been different from the other rangers at Pine Ridge National Park. While her male colleagues spent their evenings at the local bar sharing loud stories about their latest rescues, she preferred studying topographical maps and reading survival manuals by lamplight in her small cabin. At 28, she had already earned more wilderness certifications than rangers with twice her experience. But recognition seemed to slip through her fingers like morning mist on the mountain peaks. The discrimination wasn't always obvious. It came in subtle forms that made her question herself. When she suggested a new trail maintenance schedule that could prevent erosion, her supervisor, Bob Henderson, would nod politely and then implement a similar plan weeks later, crediting it to collaborative thinking. When she completed rescue training exercises faster than her peers, the times were mysteriously not recorded. When she volunteered for the most challenging assignments, she was told those positions required someone with more upper body strength. Maria had grown up in the mountains of Colorado, where her grandmother taught her to read weather patterns in cloud formations and find water sources by watching bird flight patterns. Her father, a forest ranger himself, had shown her how to navigate, using only the stars, and how to build shelter from materials that most people would overlook. By age 12, she could identify edible plants that could sustain someone for weeks and knew which tree bark could treat infections. These weren't skills learned from textbooks, but knowledge passed down through generations of people who respected the mountain's power. The other rangers at Pine Ridge saw her quiet confidence as arrogance. They interpreted her careful preparation as showing off. When she carried extra emergency supplies that regulation didn't require, they rolled their eyes and called her paranoid. When she spent her off days hiking the most remote trails to familiarize herself with every ridge and valley, they said she was trying too hard to impress the supervisors. The tension reached a breaking point during the annual team-building retreat. The Park Service had organized a 3-day camping expedition to Devil's Peak, one of the most challenging mountains in their jurisdiction. The peak earned its name from unpredictable weather patterns and terrain that could shift from gentle slopes to sheer cliff faces without warning. Local climbing experts considered it a serious challenge, even with full equipment and proper planning. Bob Henderson stood before the assembled group of 15 rangers, his weathered face serious as he outlined the exercise. "This isn't just about teamwork," he explained, pointing to the mountain that loomed behind him like a sleeping giant. "This is about proving you can handle real emergencies when lives are on the line. We'll be simulating a rescue scenario, where a group of hikers is stranded near the summit. Your job is to reach them, assess their condition, and bring them down safely." The rangers would be divided into 3 teams of 5 people each. Standard protocol called for each team to carry regulation climbing gear, including ropes, anchors, and mechanical ascenders. The exercise was designed to take 2 days with teams camping at designated points before making their final ascent to the rescue point. Maria listened carefully as Henderson assigned the teams. She noticed immediately that she was the only woman ranger on the entire expedition, something that had become painfully normal in her 3 years at Pine Ridge. What surprised her was the team assignment. Instead of being placed with the most experienced climbers as her qualifications suggested, she found herself grouped with 4 of the newest rangers, none with more than 18 months of experience. Her team consisted of Jake Morrison, a recent academy graduate who had grown up in flat farmland and had never seen a mountain before joining the Park Service. There was Tommy Chen, enthusiastic but prone to panic under pressure, who had already failed his first climbing certification test twice. Mark Rodriguez seemed capable enough but had a habit of taking shortcuts that worried Maria during training exercises. The final member was Dave Williams, whose main qualification seemed to be his ability to carry heavy loads, though his navigation skills were questionable at best. As the other teams loaded their vehicles with professional climbing equipment, Maria noticed something that made her stomach clench with uneasiness. Her team's gear allocation was significantly different. While the other groups received full sets of ropes, harnesses, carabiners, and climbing hardware, her team was handed a single coil of rope and told that the rest of their equipment was being checked for safety compliance. "Where's our climbing gear?" Maria asked Henderson directly, her voice steady despite the growing suspicion in her chest. Henderson shrugged with the casual indifference of someone delivering routine information. "Budget cuts," he said without meeting her eyes. "Your team will need to demonstrate resourcefulness. Real emergencies don't always come with perfect equipment." The explanation felt hollow, especially when Maria spotted the missing equipment loaded in Henderson's personal vehicle. She watched him and two other senior rangers exchange knowing looks that confirmed her worst fears. This wasn't about budget cuts or testing resourcefulness. This was about putting her in an impossible situation where failure would justify all their previous dismissals of her abilities. The drive to Devil's Peak Base Camp took 3 hours through increasingly rough terrain. Maria sat in the passenger seat of their assigned vehicle, studying the mountain through the windshield while her teammates chatted nervously behind her. The peak rose nearly 8,000 feet above sea level, its upper reaches hidden in clouds that moved too quickly for her comfort. The weather report had called for clear conditions, but Maria recognized the signs of an approaching storm system in the way the wind moved through the valley. At base camp, the 3 teams gathered for final instructions. The other 2 groups methodically organized their equipment with the confidence of people who knew they had everything necessary for success. Maria's team stood awkwardly around their meager supplies, trying to hide their obvious disadvantage. Henderson addressed the groups with military precision. Radio check-in is every 4 hours. If any team fails to report or requests emergency assistance, the exercise ends for everyone. The first team to reach the simulated victims and successfully demonstrate proper rescue technique wins recognition and a commendation in their personnel files. The competitive element wasn't lost on anyone. In the Park Service, commendations directly influenced promotion opportunities and assignment preferences. For Maria, this could be the breakthrough she needed to prove her worth. For her teammates, it was a chance to advance their careers under the guidance of someone they were beginning to realize might be more qualified than anyone had suggested. As the sun began to set, painting Devil's Peak in shades of orange and purple, Maria gathered her team for their own planning session. She spread a topographical map on the ground and used a flashlight to illuminate the route options. The other teams will take the standard climbing approach, she explained, tracing the marked trail with her finger. It's the safest route, but also the longest. With their equipment, they can handle the technical sections easily, but it will take them the full 2 days. Jake leaned forward, squinting at the map. What are you thinking? Maria pointed to a different route that seemed to cut directly up the mountain's face. There's an old hunting trail that connects to a series of natural ledges. It's steeper and more dangerous, but it could get us to the top in half the time. The catch is that it requires techniques that aren't taught in standard ranger training. Tommy's voice cracked slightly as he spoke. What kind of techniques? Free climbing. Moving across rock faces using only handholds and footholds. No ropes for support, just for emergency backup. Maria looked each of her teammates in the eye. I can teach you, but you'll have to trust me completely. One mistake could be fatal. The team fell silent as they considered the implications. They were being asked to choose between almost certain failure following conventional methods without proper equipment, or possible success by attempting something that pushed far beyond their training and experience. Mark was the first to speak. What makes you think we can do something like that? No offense, but none of us are experienced climbers. Because the mountain teaches you what you need to know if you listen carefully enough, Maria replied. My grandmother used to say that rocks speak to those who pay attention. Every surface tells you whether it can hold your weight. Every crack shows you where to place your hands. The key is learning to read those signs. Dave, who had been quiet throughout the discussion, surprised everyone by voicing what they were all thinking. This isn't really about winning the exercise, is it? They set us up to fail, Maria nodded slowly. I think they wanted to prove that I can't handle difficult assignments. They probably figured that putting me with the newest team members and limiting our equipment would guarantee failure. Then they could point to the results as evidence that I'm not ready for more responsibility. So what do? Jake asked. We prove them wrong, Maria said simply. But only if you're willing to trust me and push beyond what you think you're capable of. I won't lie to you about the risks. This approach is dangerous, but I believe we can do it. The team spent the next hour discussing the plan in detail. Maria shared techniques her father and grandmother had taught her. Methods developed by people who climbed mountains long before modern equipment made it routine. She showed them how to test rock stability by sound, how to distribute weight to maintain balance on narrow ledges, and how to recognize the subtle signs that indicated safe climbing routes. As the night grew deeper, They made their final preparations. While the other teams settled into their sleeping bags confident in their traditional approach, Maria's team prepared for something unprecedented. They sorted their minimal supplies, checked and rechecked their single rope, and reviewed emergency procedures until everyone could recite them perfectly. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the mountain's face and revealing details that would be invisible in daylight. Maria pointed out the route they would take, showing her teammates specific landmarks they would use for navigation. The path looked impossibly steep and dangerous, but her quiet confidence began to inspire a tentative belief in their chances. "Get some rest," Maria told them as they finally prepared to sleep. "We start climbing before dawn. By tomorrow evening, we'll either be celebrating at the summit or we'll have learned something important about ourselves." Tommy voiced the question they were all thinking. "What if we can't do it? What if we get stuck halfway up?" Maria looked up at Devil's Peak, its summit barely visible against the star-filled sky. "Then we'll figure out a way to survive until help arrives. But I don't think it will come to that. Mountains respect courage and preparation. We have both." As her teammates drifted off to sleep, Maria remained awake studying the mountain's silhouette. She thought about all the times she had been underestimated, all the opportunities she had been denied because others couldn't see past their own prejudices. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow she would show them what determination and skill could accomplish, even without the advantage of superior equipment. The wind picked up as midnight approached, carrying with it the scent of approaching weather. Maria recognized the signs of a storm system moving in faster than predicted. Their window of opportunity was narrowing, but that only strengthened her resolve. She had been preparing for a moment like this her entire life, and she wasn't about to let fear or doubt prevent her from seizing it. In the distance, Devil's Peak waited in silent challenge, its rocky face scarred by countless storms and marked by the passage of time. By tomorrow night, it would either remain unconquered by their small team, or it would bear witness to the kind of achievement that changes everything. Maria closed her eyes and listened to the mountain's ancient voice, preparing herself for the climb that would define not just her career, but her understanding of what was truly possible when courage met opportunity on the edge of impossibility. The alarm on Maria's watch vibrated silently at 4:30 in the morning. Around her, the other teams remained deep in sleep, confident that their conventional approach would require no special timing. Maria quietly woke her teammates, using gentle touches rather than voices that might alert the others to their early departure. The mountain air was crisp and thin, carrying the scent of pine and the distant threat of storm clouds. Maria had been right about the weather. The forecast had missed the approaching system that was now clearly visible as a dark mass moving across the western horizon. They had perhaps 8 hours before conditions would become dangerous for any team, regardless of equipment. Her teammates moved with nervous energy as they broke camp in near silence. Jake's hands shook slightly as he secured his pack. Whether from cold or anxiety wasn't clear. Tommy kept checking and rechecking his gear with the obsessive attention of someone trying to control fear through preparation. Mark and Dave worked efficiently, but quietly, their usual chatter replaced by the gravity of what they were about to attempt. "Remember what we practiced last night?" Maria whispered as they gathered their supplies. "Trust your instincts, test every handhold, and communicate constantly. If anyone feels unsafe at any point, we stop and reassess." The first hour of climbing followed established trails that all the teams would use. Maria set a steady pace that warmed their muscles without exhausting their energy reserves. As they climbed higher, the familiar sounds of the forest gradually faded, replaced by the whisper of wind through rock formations and the distant calls of mountain birds greeting the dawn. When they reached the point where their route would diverge from the standard path, Maria called for a brief rest. Below them, the base camp looked impossibly small, and above them, the mountain's true challenge began to reveal itself. The route she had chosen followed a series of natural ledges and rock formations that created a pathway invisible to anyone who didn't know exactly where to look. "This is where it gets interesting," Maria said, pointing to what appeared to be a sheer cliff face. "See that dark line running diagonally up the rock? That's a natural crack system that creates handholds. And those shadow lines? They mark ledges wide enough to rest on." Her teammates studied the route with expressions ranging from determination to barely controlled terror. The path Maria described required them to traverse sections where a fall would mean serious injury or death. There were no safety nets, no backup systems, just skill, courage, and the single rope they carried for absolute emergencies. Tommy's voice was tight with stress. "How do you know this route exists? It's not on any of the maps we studied." "Aft. My father brought me here when I was 16, Maria replied. "He wanted to teach me that there are always options if you're willing to look beyond the obvious choices." Native Americans used routes like this for centuries before anyone thought to mark trails with signs and paint blazes. She moved to the cliff face and demonstrated the technique they would need. Her hands moved across the rock surface with practiced confidence, finding holds that seemed to appear under her touch. She climbed perhaps 20 feet before pausing on a narrow ledge and calling down instructions. "The rock here is granite, which means it's stable and provides good friction. Feel for the natural indentations where water has worn away softer minerals. Those make the most reliable handholds. And remember, your legs do most of the work. Your arms are just for balance and stability." One by one, her teammates followed her lead. Jake surprised everyone by adapting quickly to the climbing technique, his farm background having given him the kind of practical body awareness that served him well on the rock face. Tommy struggled initially, his tendency toward panic making him grip too tightly and tire his arms. But Maria's patient coaching helped him find his rhythm. Mark's shortcut mentality proved problematic on the cliff face, where there were no shortcuts, only careful progression from one secure position to the next. Dave's strength was an asset, but his size made some of the narrower passages challenging. Maria adapted her instruction to each person's abilities, finding ways to help them succeed rather than expecting them to conform to a single approach. By mid-morning, they had gained significant elevation and were climbing sections that would have been impossible without technical equipment for most people. But Maria's unconventional training was paying off. Her teammates were learning to read the rock, to trust their bodies, and to work as a coordinated team in situations where individual mistakes could endanger everyone. The first radio check-in at 8 o'clock revealed their advantage. While the other teams reported steady progress along standard routes, Maria's team was already hours ahead of the anticipated schedule. Henderson's voice over the radio carried a note of surprise that he tried to mask with routine professionalism. "Team 3. Report your current position," he requested. Maria keyed the radio. "Team 3 is approximately 2/3 of the way to the objective, following an alternative route on the northeast face." A long pause followed before Henderson responded. "Team 3. Confirm your position. You're reporting significantly faster progress than projected." "Confirmed," Maria replied calmly. "We identified a more direct route that takes advantage of natural rock formations." The radio crackled with crosstalk as the other teams in base camp tried to understand how the supposedly weakest team was outpacing everyone else by such a significant margin. Maria smiled grimly as she imagined Henderson's reaction to the news that his scheme to humiliate her was backfiring spectacularly. The climbing became more technical as they approached the upper reaches of the mountain. Here, the rock face was nearly vertical, requiring them to use advanced techniques that pushed the limits of their newly acquired skills. Maria went first on each section, securing the rope and calling back detailed instructions for the challenging moves. "There's a sequence coming up that requires precise timing," she warned as they prepared for one particularly difficult passage. "You'll need to make 3 moves quickly because the middle handhold won't support your weight for more than a few seconds. Watch me first, then follow exactly." She demonstrated the sequence, her movements flowing like a carefully choreographed dance. Reach high with the left hand to a small crystal formation. Step up with the right foot to a narrow crack. Immediately shift weight to the right hand on a more secure hold. Then step through with the left foot to a stable ledge. The entire sequence took perhaps 10 seconds, but required absolute precision. Jake managed the sequence on his first attempt, his natural athleticism and growing confidence serving him well. Tommy needed 2 tries, the first ending with him hanging from the rope as his grip failed on the temporary handhold. But he learned from the experience and completed it successfully the second time. Mark and Dave both struggled with the technical demands, but eventually worked their way through with Maria's guidance. As they climbed higher, the weather that Maria had predicted began to manifest more clearly. The wind picked up noticeably, and clouds that had seemed distant at dawn were now clearly moving toward the mountain. The temperature dropped several degrees, making the rock surface cold to the touch and adding urgency to their efforts. "We need to reach the summit area before those clouds arrive," Maria told her team during a brief rest on a substantial ledge. "Once visibility drops, this route becomes too dangerous to continue." They were perhaps an hour from their objective when they encountered the most challenging obstacle of the entire climb. A gap in the rock face created a space too wide to step across, but too narrow to require rappelling gear. The solution required a dynamic move where each climber would need to leap from one hold to another with no safety net other than their own ability and the rope backup. Maria studied the obstacle carefully, testing different approach angles and examining the landing holds on the far side. The gap was perhaps 6 feet horizontally, but the landing zone required precise placement to avoid a fall down the cliff face below. "I'll go first and secure a rope anchor on the other side," she told her team. "Then each of you will make the jump with the rope as backup. If you miss, the rope will catch you, but the impact will be significant." The dynamic move required her to build momentum on the approach, push off with maximum force, and commit completely to the landing despite not being able to see exactly where her hands would land. Maria took 3 deep breaths, visualized the sequence, and launched herself across the gap. Her landing was solid, hands connecting with the intended holds, and feet finding purchase on the narrow ledge. She quickly secured the rope around a natural anchor point and called back encouragement to her teammates. Jake's jump was almost perfect, his athletic background serving him well in the explosive movement. Tommy overcame his fear with determination, making a slightly awkward but successful crossing. Mark hesitated longer than the others but eventually committed to the move and landed safely. Dave presented the greatest challenge. His larger size made the dynamic move more difficult, and his natural caution worked against him in a situation that required total commitment. On his first attempt, he hesitated at the crucial moment and had to abort the jump, leaving him hanging from his hands on the departure side. "You can do this," Maria called across the gap. "Don't think about the consequences. Trust your body and commit completely to the movement." Dave's second attempt was successful, though he landed harder than the others and needed a moment to recover his composure. But the entire team was now across the obstacle and within striking distance of their objective. The final approach to the summit area where the simulated rescue was located involved easier climbing but required careful navigation through a maze of rock formations and narrow passages. Maria's knowledge of the mountain proved invaluable as she led them through routes that avoided dead ends and dangerous loose rock areas. As they neared the summit, voices carried on, the wind revealed the location of their objective. The simulated victims were positioned on a narrow ledge that could only be reached from above, requiring the rescue team to set up an anchor system and rappel down to reach them. It was exactly the kind of technical rescue that supposedly required the equipment her team had been denied. Maria studied the situation carefully, looking for the solution that her unconventional approach would require. The ledge where the victims waited was perhaps 40 feet below the summit, accessible only by rope work that seemed to demand the technical gear the other teams carried. But Maria noticed something that changed everything. A natural chimney formation in the rock led directly down to the ledge where the victims waited. The chimney was narrow enough that a climber could wedge their body between the walls and descend using pressure and friction rather than ropes and anchors. It was a technique as old as climbing itself, but one that required skill and courage that most modern climbers never developed. "There's our route," she told her teammates, pointing to the chimney. "We can climb down to them using the walls for support, then help them climb back up the same way." The radio crackled with the noon check-in as Maria's team prepared for the final phase of their rescue. Henderson's voice carried a note of frustration that he was trying hard to conceal. "All teams report current status and estimated time to objective." Team 1 reported they were still several hours from the summit, having encountered unexpected difficulty with a technical section that required careful rope work. Team 2 had made better progress but estimated arrival at the objective in late afternoon. Maria keyed her radio with satisfaction. Team 3 has reached the objective area and is beginning the rescue phase. The silence that followed was profound. Then Henderson's voice returned, tight with disbelief. Team 3. Confirm you have reached the victims and are beginning extraction procedures. Confirmed, Maria replied. Beginning descent to victim location now. As she prepared to enter the chimney that would complete their unprecedented ascent, Maria looked back at her teammates. They had been transformed by the climb from uncertain rookies into a confident team capable of achieving what experienced rangers with superior equipment couldn't match. The mountain had indeed taught them what they needed to know. The storm clouds that had threatened all morning were now clearly visible, moving steadily toward Devil's Peak. But they had time to complete the rescue and begin their descent before weather became a factor. Maria smiled as she began the descent to the simulated victims, knowing that everything was about to change for all of them. The chimney descent proved to be one of the most technically demanding challenges of the entire climb. Maria went first, demonstrating the technique her father had taught her years earlier. The narrow space between rock walls required her to brace her back against one side, while using her feet to push against the other, controlling her descent through friction and careful weight distribution. Keep your movements small and controlled, she called up to her teammates as she worked her way down the 40-foot chimney. If you try to move too quickly, you'll lose the pressure that holds you in place. The simulated victims turned out to be 2 junior rangers from a different district, both wearing fake injuries and carrying clipboards to evaluate the rescue team's performance. Their expressions showed genuine surprise as Maria appeared above them on the narrow ledge. "How did you get here so fast?" asked the first evaluator, a woman named Sarah Chen, who specialized in technical rescue training. "We weren't expecting anyone for at least 3 more hours." Maria smiled as she secured herself on the ledge. "We found a more direct route." "Are you ready to be rescued?" The second evaluator, Robert Martinez, checked his watch with disbelief. "It's only 12:30. The exercise wasn't scheduled to begin until 4 o'clock this afternoon." "Well, we're here now," Maria replied. "Should we pretend to wait? Or can we demonstrate the rescue techniques?" One by one, her teammates descended the chimney with varying degrees of skill and confidence. Jake adapted quickly to the technique, while Tommy required more coaching but eventually managed the descent safely. Mark struggled with the precision required but made it down without incident. Dave's size made the chimney particularly challenging, but his determination and Maria's guidance helped him succeed. The rescue scenario called for the team to assess the victims' injuries, stabilize them for transport, and evacuate them to safety using proper techniques. Standard procedure required mechanical advantage systems using pulleys and anchors to lift injured people up cliff faces. But Maria's team would need to rely on the same unconventional methods that had brought them this far. "Your injuries are a broken leg and a dislocated shoulder," Sarah explained, handing Maria a card with the scenario details. "How do you plan to evacuate us without technical rescue equipment?" Maria studied the chimney formation and the capabilities of her team. The solution would require careful coordination and techniques that pushed beyond standard ranger training, but it was achievable with the skills they had developed during their ascent. "We'll create a human assistance system," she explained. "2 of us will climb up first and establish secure positions. Then we'll work together to help each victim climb the chimney with assistance and support for the injured areas." Robert raised an eyebrow. "That's not a standard rescue technique." "It's older than standard rescue techniques," Maria replied. "Before we had mechanical systems, people saved each other through cooperation and skill." The rescue began with Maria and Jake climbing back up the chimney to establish positions where they could provide maximum assistance. From secure stances, they could guide the victims' movements and provide support that compensated for their simulated injuries. Sarah went first, with Maria coaching her through each movement, while Jake provided a steadying hand and guidance for foot placement. The simulated broken leg required creative adaptation, using arm strength and the uninjured leg, while Maria and Jake managed the movements that the injured limb couldn't perform. The process was slow and required constant communication, but it worked. Sarah reached the top of the chimney safely, her evaluation notes already reflecting her amazement at the unconventional but effective technique. Robert's simulated dislocated shoulder presented different challenges, requiring Tommy and Mark to position themselves within the chimney to provide support that compensated for the injured arm. Again, the technique worked through teamwork and adaptation, rather than mechanical advantage. As the last victim reached safety, Maria's radio crackled with an emergency transmission that changed everything. Henderson's voice carried genuine urgency as he broadcast to all teams. All teams, be advised that weather conditions have deteriorated faster than predicted. We have reports of severe storms moving in from the west with high winds and possible lightning. All teams abort current positions and return to base camp immediately. Maria looked at the approaching storm clouds, now clearly visible as a dark wall moving across the valley below them. Lightning flickered in the distance, and the wind had picked up dramatically in just the past hour. The other teams, still hours from completing their objectives, would have to retreat without finishing the exercise. But Maria's team was already at the summit with their rescue complete. They had time to begin their descent before the storm arrived, giving them a significant advantage. More importantly, they had proven that determination and unconventional thinking could achieve results that superior equipment couldn't guarantee. Team 3, to base camp. Maria radioed. Rescue complete. Beginning descent immediately. Henderson's response came quickly. Team 3, confirm you have completed the rescue scenario. Confirmed. Both victims evacuated successfully and ready for transport to base camp. The evaluators added their own confirmation. Base camp, this is evaluation team. Team 3 completed a successful rescue using unconventional but effective techniques. Estimated time for descent is 2 hours, if weather permits. As they prepared to leave the summit, Maria gathered her team for a brief strategy session. The descent would require different techniques than their ascent, particularly with 2 additional people who weren't trained in the climbing methods they had used. We'll take the standard route down, she decided. It's longer, but safer, with extra people and deteriorating weather. We'll move as quickly as conditions allow. The descent began just as the first raindrops started falling. The standard route followed established switchbacks and used fixed anchor points that previous climbing teams had installed over the years. While it didn't require the technical skill of their ascent route, it demanded careful attention to footing as the rock surfaces became slippery. Sarah and Robert proved to be experienced climbers who adapted quickly to the conditions. Their injuries were forgotten as the simulation ended, and they focused on real safety concerns presented by the approaching storm. They were both impressed by Maria's team and eager to learn about the unconventional techniques that had brought them to the summit so efficiently. I've been doing technical rescues for 8 years, Sarah told Maria as they descended together. I've never seen anyone complete an exercise like that without mechanical advantage systems. Where did you learn those techniques? Family tradition, Maria replied. My grandmother always said that people were solving problems in the mountains long before we had fancy equipment. Sometimes the old ways work better than the new ways. The rain intensified as they descended, making the rock surfaces treacherous and reducing visibility. But Maria's knowledge of the mountain served them well. She guided the group along routes that offered protection from the wind and avoided areas where loose rock could be dislodged by the rain. About halfway down, they encountered the other 2 teams ascending toward them. Both groups had made the difficult decision to abort their missions when the weather deteriorated. The contrast was stark. Maria's team was descending in triumph, with their objectives complete, while the other teams were retreating in disappointment. Henderson's voice over the radio carried barely concealed frustration. All teams returned to base camp immediately. Exercise terminated due to weather conditions. Team 1's leader, a veteran ranger named Mike Patterson, approached Maria as their groups passed on the trail. How did you complete the rescue so quickly? He asked. We're still 3 hours from the summit, even with full equipment. We found a different way, Maria replied simply. Patterson looked at her teammates, noting their confidence and the obvious respect they showed for her leadership. What kind of different way? The kind that works when you don't have every advantage handed to you, Jake answered before Maria could respond. The descent continued through increasingly difficult conditions. The rain had turned into a steady downpour, and lightning was becoming frequent enough to be concerning. But Maria's team maintained their lead, reaching the lower elevations as the storm reached its peak intensity. By the time they reached base camp, they were soaked and exhausted but triumphant. The other teams arrived over the next hour, having struggled with equipment that became cumbersome in the harsh weather conditions. Henderson waited at the camp with an expression that mixed professional obligation with personal disappointment. As the senior supervisor, he was required to acknowledge their achievement, but his plan to humiliate Maria had backfired completely. Team 3, he announced formally, you have successfully completed the rescue exercise in record time using unconventional methods. The evaluators will file their reports, and commendations will be processed according to regulations. Sarah and Robert approached Maria privately as the formal debriefing concluded. We're recommending you for advanced certification in technical rescue, Sarah told her. What you accomplished today goes far beyond standard ranger qualifications. Robert nodded agreement. I'd like to arrange for you to demonstrate these techniques to our training academy. There's a lot that traditional rescue training could learn from your approach. As the teams packed their equipment and prepared to return to headquarters, Maria's teammates gathered around her with expressions of amazement and gratitude. The quiet woman they had initially doubted had led them to an achievement none of them had thought possible. You didn't just teach us to climb, Tommy said. You taught us to believe we could do things we never imagined. Mark, who had initially questioned her unconventional approach, was more direct. They tried to set us up to fail, and you turned it into the biggest success any of us has ever had. Dave, ever practical, voiced what everyone was thinking. Maria looked back at Devil's Peak, its summit now hidden in storm clouds. The mountain had indeed taught them what they needed to know. But the lessons went far beyond climbing techniques. They had learned that artificial limitations often create opportunities for those brave enough to seek alternative solutions. It changes everything, she agreed. But this is just the beginning. As they drove away from base camp, Maria realized that the mountain had given her more than vindication of her abilities. It had provided her with a team of rangers who would never again accept that something was impossible simply because conventional wisdom said it was. Together, they had proven that courage, skill, and determination could overcome any disadvantage. The storm continued to rage around Devil's Peak as their convoy descended toward civilization. But Maria's team traveled in the warm glow of achievement. They had climbed higher and faster than anyone expected, completed their mission against impossible odds, and emerged as a unified force that would reshape how people thought about what rangers could accomplish. Henderson rode in the lead vehicle, his radio silent as he contemplated how to explain to his superiors that his plan to discredit Maria Santos had instead created a legend. The news of Team 3's unprecedented success spread through the Park Service network faster than anyone anticipated. Within 48 hours of their return from Devil's Peak, Maria found herself fielding calls from regional supervisors, training academies, and rescue organizations across 3 states. The story of rangers completing a technical rescue without equipment had captured imaginations and challenged assumptions about modern rescue protocols. Robert Martinez followed through on his promise immediately. His report to the National Technical Rescue Academy was detailed and glowing, describing techniques that senior instructors had never seen demonstrated. The Academy director, a veteran named Colonel James Wright, requested a full presentation and demonstration within the week. Sarah Chen's evaluation was equally impressive. Her report highlighted not just the successful completion of the exercise, but the innovative leadership that made it possible. She specifically noted Maria's ability to teach complex techniques under pressure and create team cohesion among rangers with minimal experience. But the most significant response came from an unexpected source. Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne, a researcher studying survival psychology at the University of Colorado, had heard about the Devil's Peak exercise through her contacts in the Park Service. Her research focused on how people overcome limitations through adaptive thinking, and Maria's achievement represented exactly the kind of case study she was seeking. I'd like to document what happened up there, Doctor, Hawthorne told Maria during a phone call 3 days after the exercise. Not just the technical climbing aspects, but the psychological and social dynamics that made it possible. Maria was hesitant about academic attention. I'm not sure there's anything special to study. We just found a different way to solve the problem. That's exactly what makes it special, Doctor, Hawthorne replied. Most people accept artificial limitations as real barriers. You proved that creative thinking can overcome systemic disadvantages. That's something the world needs to understand better. Meanwhile, the atmosphere at Pine Ridge National Park had shifted dramatically. Maria's teammates had returned as heroes among their peers, eager to share details of their unconventional ascent. Their confidence and enthusiasm infected other rangers, creating a buzz of excitement about possibilities that had never been explored. Jake Morrison, the farm boy who had never seen a mountain before joining the Park Service, found himself in demand as a speaker at ranger meetings. His transformation from nervous rookie to competent climber inspired others who felt limited by their backgrounds. Maria didn't just teach us to climb, he told a gathering of junior rangers. She taught us that the only real limitations are the ones we accept in our own minds. Tommy Chen, who had struggled with panic responses during training, became an advocate for unconventional approaches to skill development. His success in overcoming his fears through Maria's patient instruction demonstrated that personal limitations could be overcome with proper guidance and determination. Even Mark Rodriguez and Dave Williams, the team members who had initially shown the most skepticism, were now enthusiastic promoters of Maria's methods. Their success stories spread throughout the Park Service, challenging other rangers to reconsider their own assumptions about what was possible. But not everyone was pleased with the attention Maria's achievement was receiving. Bob Henderson found himself in an increasingly uncomfortable position as his role in the Devil's Peak exercise came under scrutiny. His plan to discredit Maria had not only failed but had inadvertently created exactly the kind of recognition he had hoped to prevent. Henderson was particularly disturbed by a call from his district supervisor, Regional Director Patricia Walsh. Walsh had built her career on promoting innovation and excellence in Park Service operations, and she was intrigued by reports of the unconventional rescue techniques. "Bob, I need to understand what happened at Devil's Peak," Walsh told him during a video conference call. "The reports I'm receiving describe techniques that aren't part of standard training protocols. Where did Ranger Santos learn these methods?" Henderson struggled to provide an explanation that didn't reveal his discriminatory intentions. "Santos has always been unconventional in her approach to training, unconventional enough to complete a technical rescue without standard equipment," Walsh pressed. "That suggests either exceptional skill or serious safety violations. Which was it?" "Her team was successful," Henderson admitted reluctantly. "But their methods weren't approved techniques." Walsh's expression sharpened. "Were they unsafe techniques?" "No. The evaluators confirmed that safety protocols were maintained throughout the exercise." "Then it sounds like we have a ranger who developed innovative solutions to complex problems. That's exactly what we want to encourage." Walsh paused, studying Henderson's uncomfortable expression. "Unless there's something about this situation that you haven't explained." Henderson realized he was approaching dangerous territory. Any admission of his role in limiting Maria's equipment could expose his discriminatory motives. "No, nothing else to explain. Santos and her team completed the exercise successfully." But Walsh was too experienced not to recognize the signs of a supervisor trying to hide something. She made a note to investigate the Devil's Peak exercise more thoroughly, particularly the equipment allocation decisions that seemed to have created the conditions for Maria's unconventional success. 3 days later, Maria received official notification that she was being promoted to lead ranger for technical operations, a position that hadn't existed before but was being created specifically to utilize her unique skills. The promotion came with a significant salary increase and authority to develop new training protocols for the entire district. More importantly, she was being assigned to work directly with Dr. Hawthorne on a comprehensive study of survival psychology and adaptive problem-solving. The research would be funded by a grant from the National Science Foundation and could lead to fundamental changes in how rescue operations were conducted. "This is bigger than just our park," Regional Director Walsh explained during a personal meeting with Maria. "Your achievement at Devil's Peak has implications for emergency response training across multiple agencies. We want you to lead the development of new approaches that could save lives in situations where conventional methods aren't available." Maria accepted the promotion with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The recognition was everything she had worked toward, but she understood that success would bring new challenges and expectations. Her first assignment was to design a comprehensive training program that incorporated the techniques she had used on Devil's Peak. The program would be tested at Pine Ridge before being evaluated for implementation at other parks and rescue organizations. Maria's new position also gave her authority to select her own team for training, development, and demonstration purposes. Without hesitation, she chose Jake, Tommy, Mark, and Dave as her core instructors. Their transformation from inexperienced rookies to skilled climbers made them perfect examples of what the training could accomplish. The training program that emerged was revolutionary in its approach. Rather than focusing solely on equipment-dependent techniques, it emphasized the development of natural abilities, environmental awareness, and adaptive problem-solving. Students learned to read rock formations, assess weather patterns, and work as coordinated teams under challenging conditions. Dr. Hawthorne's research provided the psychological framework that explained why Maria's methods were so effective. Her study revealed that people performed at higher levels when they were taught to view limitations as puzzles to be solved, rather than barriers to be accepted. Traditional training creates dependency on external resources, Dr. Hawthorne explained in her preliminary report. Maria's approach develops internal capabilities that can adapt to any situation. The result is people who are genuinely more capable, not just better equipped. The first official class of the new training program included rangers from 6 different parks, search and rescue volunteers from 3 states, and military personnel interested in unconventional approaches to difficult terrain operations. The 5-day intensive course was conducted at Devil's Peak, using the same routes and challenges that had tested Maria's original team. Maria stood at the base of the mountain where her journey had begun, looking up at the peak that had transformed her from an underestimated ranger into a recognized innovator. Her students gathered around her with expressions of excitement and nervousness that reminded her of her own team's first morning. "Before we start climbing," she told them, "I want you to understand something important. This mountain doesn't care about your experience level, your equipment, or your preconceptions about what's possible. It only responds to respect, preparation, and courage." She pointed toward the route they would follow, the same unconventional path that had carried her team to victory. "By the end of this week, you'll have climbed routes that most people consider impossible without technical equipment. You'll have discovered capabilities you didn't know you possessed. And you'll understand that the biggest limitations we face are usually the ones we impose on ourselves." As the group began their ascent, Maria reflected on how completely her life had changed since that morning when she had awakened to find herself assigned to a team designed to fail. The discrimination she had faced had ultimately created the conditions for her greatest triumph. But more than personal vindication, her success had opened doors for others who had been underestimated or limited by conventional thinking. Her training program was producing rangers who saw challenges as opportunities and obstacles as puzzles to be solved. Dr. Hawthorne's research was generating interest from universities, government agencies, and international rescue organizations. The principles Maria had demonstrated were being applied to fields far beyond mountain rescue. From military operations to corporate team building, Regional Director Walsh had already approved funding for an expanded training facility and requested that Maria develop advanced programs for specialized rescue scenarios. There was talk of creating a new certification level that would recognize rangers trained in adaptive survival techniques. Most satisfying of all, Maria's original teammates had become instructors in their own right, each developing specialties that built on the foundation she had provided. Jake had become expert in teaching climbing techniques to people from non-mountainous backgrounds. Tommy specialized in helping rangers overcome fear-based limitations. Mark and Dave had developed innovative approaches to equipment-minimal rescue scenarios. The transformation was complete, but Maria understood that it was only the beginning. Her success had proven that determined individuals could overcome systemic barriers and create new possibilities. Now her challenge was to ensure that those possibilities became available to others who faced similar obstacles. As her new students made their way up Devil's Peak, following the path she had pioneered, Maria smiled at the realization that she had become exactly what she had always dreamed of being: a ranger whose skills and innovations would genuinely save lives and inspire others to exceed their perceived limitations. The mountain that had tested her so severely had become her greatest ally in changing not just her own future, but the future of everyone who would benefit from the techniques and attitudes she had developed during those crucial hours when failure seemed certain and success required everything she could give. 6 months after the Devil's Peak exercise, Maria stood in the conference room of the National Technical Rescue Academy, addressing an audience of emergency response professionals from across North America. The presentation was the culmination of Dr. Hawthorne's research and represented a fundamental shift in how rescue organizations approach training and operations. Traditional rescue training assumes that people are limited by their basic capabilities, Maria told the assembled experts. Our research shows that those limitations are largely artificial. When people learn to work with natural systems, rather than relying solely on mechanical ones, their actual capabilities far exceed what anyone expected. The audience included representatives from the Coast Guard, Forest Service, National Park Service, and civilian search and rescue organizations. Many had come specifically to learn about the techniques that had generated so much attention in the emergency response community. Dr. Hawthorne presented the psychological research that supported Maria's practical innovations. Our study of 200 rescue professionals shows that those trained in adaptive techniques demonstrate significantly better performance under stress, greater creativity in problem-solving, and improved team cohesion compared to those trained only in traditional methods. The data was compelling. Rangers trained in Maria's program completed rescue scenarios an average of 40% faster than those using conventional approaches. More importantly, they showed better outcomes when equipment failed or was unavailable, situations that occurred more frequently than most people realized. But the most dramatic evidence came from real-world applications. Maria's techniques had already been credited with saving lives in 3 separate incidents, where conventional methods would have required equipment that wasn't available. The first case involved 2 hikers trapped on a cliff face during a flash flood in Colorado. The rescue team couldn't get mechanical equipment to the site due to road damage, but rangers trained in Maria's methods were able to reach the victims using natural climbing techniques and evacuate them safely. The second incident occurred in Alaska, where a plane crash in remote terrain left survivors on a steep mountainside. Weather conditions prevented helicopter rescue for 3 days, but ground teams using adaptive climbing methods reached the crash site and established communications that guided eventual helicopter extraction. The third case was perhaps most dramatic. A landslide in Montana had trapped a family in a position that conventional rope rescue couldn't reach safely. Rangers trained in Maria's program found an alternative route using natural rock formations and completed the rescue without mechanical advantage systems. Each case demonstrated the same principle. When people developed natural capabilities, rather than depending entirely on equipment, they could adapt to situations that would otherwise be impossible. Colonel Wright, the Academy director, was particularly interested in the military applications. These techniques could revolutionize how we approach operations in difficult terrain, he told Maria after her presentation. We're seeing situations where expensive equipment isn't available or has failed, but missions still need to be completed. The Academy formally adopted Maria's training program as part of its advanced curriculum. More significantly, it committed to funding expanded research and development of the psychological principles that made the techniques effective. Back at Pine Ridge National Park, the changes were equally dramatic. Maria's promotion had created a ripple effect that transformed the entire culture of the organization. Rangers who had previously accepted limitations began questioning assumptions and developing innovative solutions to long-standing problems. Bob Henderson's position had become increasingly untenable as his role in the Devil's Peak exercise came under scrutiny. Regional Director Walsh's investigation had uncovered the equipment allocation decisions and revealed the discriminatory pattern in Henderson's management decisions. Rather than face formal disciplinary action, Henderson had requested transfer to a desk position where his biases would have less direct impact on personnel decisions. His replacement was a progressive supervisor who actively encouraged the kind of innovation that Maria represented. The Old Boys Club approach to park management is finished, Walsh told Maria during one of their regular planning meetings. Your success has shown us what we've been missing when we limit opportunities based on outdated assumptions. Maria's original teammates had all received promotions and recognition for their role in the Devil's Peak achievement. More importantly, they had become leaders in their own right, carrying forward the principles they had learned during their transformative climb. Jake Morrison was now a regional training coordinator, specializing in helping rangers from non-mountainous backgrounds develop wilderness skills. His natural teaching ability and authentic enthusiasm made him highly effective with recruits who felt intimidated by traditional training approaches. Tommy Chen had overcome his early struggles with panic responses so completely that he became a specialist in stress management and fear-based limitations. His own transformation gave him credibility with rangers who faced similar challenges. Mark Rodriguez discovered that his tendency to look for shortcuts, when properly directed, made him exceptional at finding innovative solutions to rescue scenarios. He developed a specialty in improvised equipment and field-expedient techniques. Dave Williams became an expert in strength-based rescue methods, developing techniques that maximized human capability in situations where mechanical advantage wasn't available. His practical approach resonated with rangers who preferred hands-on solutions. Together, the original Team 3 had become the core faculty of what was now called the Adaptive Rescue Training Institute. Housed at Pine Ridge but serving the entire region, the institute's reputation spread internationally. Rescue organizations from Canada, Europe, and Australia sent representatives to study the techniques. Mountain guides from the Himalayas visited to compare Maria's methods with traditional approaches used by indigenous climbers. Dr. Hawthorne's research had evolved into a comprehensive study of human potential under extreme conditions. Her work was being cited in fields ranging from sports psychology to military training to corporate leadership development. What Maria discovered on Devil's Peak has applications far beyond rescue operations, Dr. Hawthorne explained to a conference of psychologists. She demonstrated that people can transcend perceived limitations when they're taught to view challenges as opportunities for creative problem-solving rather than barriers to be overcome with superior equipment. The principles were being tested in corporate environments, where teams faced resource constraints and needed to develop innovative solutions. Military units were using the training to prepare for operations where equipment might not be available or suitable. Even educational institutions were adapting the approach, teaching students to develop natural capabilities alongside technical knowledge. But perhaps the most significant impact was on individual people who had been told they weren't capable of achieving their goals. Maria received letters from around the world, from people who had heard about her story and found inspiration to challenge their own limitations. A letter from a young woman in Alaska particularly moved her. "I was told I was too small to be a firefighter. But your story made me realize that limitations are often just other people's assumptions. I developed my own training program and became the first woman hired by our volunteer department." Another letter came from a veteran who had lost a leg in combat. "Everyone said I'd never climb again, but I learned about your techniques and found ways to adapt. Last month I reached the summit of Mount Whitney using methods that work with my prosthetic." The responses reminded Maria that her achievement on Devil's Peak represented something larger than personal vindication or professional advancement. It had become a symbol of what was possible when people refused to accept artificial limitations. 2 years after the original exercise, Maria returned to Devil's Peak with a special group. Regional Director Walsh, Dr. Hawthorne, and representatives from several major rescue organizations had come to witness a demonstration of how far the techniques had evolved. Standing at the base of the mountain that had changed everything, Maria reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The discrimination she had faced seemed like a distant memory, replaced by recognition and respect that extended far beyond anything she had originally hoped to achieve. But more than personal success, she had created something that would outlast her individual career. The Adaptive Rescue Training Institute was now permanently funded and expanding rapidly. The techniques she had developed were being taught at academies across the continent. The psychological principles behind her approach were influencing fields far beyond emergency response. "Ready to show them what we've learned?" Jake asked, as they prepared for the demonstration climb. Maria looked up at Devil's Peak, its summit clear and inviting under perfect blue skies. The mountain that had once represented an impossible challenge now felt like an old friend, ready to teach new lessons to anyone willing to listen. "Let's go show them what's possible," she replied. As the group began their ascent using the routes and techniques that Maria had pioneered, she realized that the mountain's greatest lesson hadn't been about climbing or rescue techniques. It had been about the power of refusing to accept that things couldn't be changed. The rangers ascending behind her represented a new generation of emergency responders who would never accept that something was impossible simply because conventional wisdom said it was. They had learned to see obstacles as puzzles and limitations as starting points for innovation. At the summit, looking out over the vast wilderness that she now helped protect with methods that no one had imagined possible just a few years earlier, Maria understood that her greatest achievement wasn't reaching the top of Devil's Peak. It was proving that the summit had always been reachable for anyone brave enough to find their own way up.